Mud caked his face like war paint. The thick, pungent slurry clung to his beard, filled his ears, crusted against the rims of his eyelids. He didn't blink. He hadn't moved in hours. Not since the last patrol passed just 30 meters from his position. Booted feet brushing against foliage while automated scanners buzzed and hummed above their heads. The elites relied on their machines. That was their mistake. Jack Malloran, call sign Deadeye, lay on his stomach in a shallow depression carved between roots and fungus, utterly still. His rifle, nearly as long as it was tall, sat nestled into the crook of his shoulder, supported by a makeshift bipod fashioned from scavenged polysteel and earth-made rope. No lasers, no scopes, just good old iron sights and a long barrel wrapped in burlap and grease. To breathe, he exhaled slowly through a reed he'd split in half, hidden in the crook of a moss-covered branch. Gorvax 3's air was humid, toxic in long doses, and swarming with aggressive microspores. He'd already lost 3 layers of skin on his forearm. Didn't matter. All that mattered was a shot. Through the haze of biosteam and filtered light, he could see the target platform, elevated, reinforced, guarded by ZHYR commandos who looked like insectal gods, 7 feet tall, clad in mirrored armor that shimmered like oil under a blue sun. The one in the center, the one flanked by ornate banners and ceremonial weapon drones, was a prize. Captain Threxel. Jack's breath slowed even further. Threxel was known across the consortium as a conqueror of primitive worlds, a commander who relished extermination campaigns. His name echoed through refugee camps on Mars, whispered in rage across resistance bunkers. Now he stood within Jack's sights, relaxed and smug, untouchable. Jack's finger hovered near the trigger, not quite touching. He whispered without turning, "Wind." Behind him, buried beneath leaves and covered with a sense of dampening net, Sergeant Mason Rell responded in a gravelly murmur, crosswind slight northeast. 10 clicks out, 2-point drop. Temp rising. 2 degrees since dawn. Roger. Jack made the mental adjustments. No AI calculations. No predictive algorithms. Just instinct, math, and years of muscle memory. The rifle was human-made, forged in a lab beneath the Rockies using a blend of iron, tungsten, and spite. It fired 19mm kinetic slugs, chemical propellant-based, and capable of ripping through flesh, metal, and arrogance. He closed his left eye, exhaled, and counted heartbeats. 4, 3, 2. He squeezed. The crack of the shot was thunder. Not quiet, not stealthy. It echoed across the jungle, like a slap across a face. The rifle kicked against his shoulder, digging bone against dirt. The bullet flew, not guided, not curved by tech, but direct, honest, furious. The slug hit Threxel dead center mid-sentence. 1 second the alien was pontificating over strategy. The next, his entire upper torso vanished in a mist of blood, chitin, and shattered armor. His guards froze, as did the drones. Confusion. No alarms. No warnings. Just a corpse on a platform, and no digital explanation for how it got that way. Jack rolled onto his back immediately, sliding downslope through muck and roots, his rifle already holstered across his spine. Time to move. Mason was already in motion, tossing detonation beads into the underbrush. They weren't explosives, just sonic disruptors, salvaged ZHYR tech tuned to mimic gunfire at 10-second intervals. Ghosts in the jungle. Misdirection. They sprinted through vines and thermal clouds, breath controlled, steps light. Every inch of movement had been pre-planned. They had 20 seconds before the consortium's grid realigned. Status? Jack asked, ducking beneath a low-hanging root. ZHYR just went blind. Sensors scrambled. They'll blame the fog again. They moved in silence after that. 10 minutes of perfect evasion through mud trails, fungal groves, and vine-choked riverbanks. When they reached the fallback tunnel, a collapsed mining shaft just wide enough for 2 human shoulders, Jack finally spoke again. That was for Outpost 12. Mason grunted. And for Reynolds. And no Ran. And all the civvies he flushed out of the damn hab-domes. They crawled into darkness. Behind them, sirens began to scream across the canopy, deep and confused. Above the treetops, Consortium patrol craft zipped into erratic formation, scanning for threats they didn't understand. In command centers, ZHYR officers pounded holographic displays, demanding answers from systems that only returned static. And in one encrypted sector of the interstellar web, a single incident report began to propagate. High value loss. Trajectory unknown. Origin organic. Kinetic impact. No one in the ZHYR consortium had used the phrase kinetic impact in decades. Down in the shaft, Jack unrolled a foil pack of water paste and sipped. Mason checked their map. Next target's further inland. Another commander. Rumor is he's part of the same squad that hit the Martian colonies. Jack nodded slowly. His eyes were distant. Somewhere between memory and calculation. They'll send something nastier this time, not just patrols. They're already mocking us on interfeeds. One ZHYR called you a relic with a toy. Jack smiled. Just once. It didn't reach his eyes. Good, he muttered. Let them keep laughing. Above them, high in orbit, consortium warships shifted position. Somewhere on the bridge of the command carrier Vigilant Dominion, Archon Valeth watched footage from Gorvax 3 on a glowing screen. He replayed the moment again and again. The death of Threxel, the blur of something impossible. He turned to his tacticians and uttered one word in their clicking dialect. Hunters. Then he pointed toward the human sector of space. Bring me a skull. Back in the jungle, Jack leaned against the damp stone of the shaft wall, eyes closed but alert. His hands cradled his rifle, not as a soldier holds a weapon, but as an artist holds a brush. He knew what would come next. He wasn't a fool. The elites would escalate. He'd be ready. Let them send hunters. He was the one they'd never see coming. The hunter arrived on Gorvax 3 during a blackdown storm. No transport signatures. No descent trails. One moment the sky roiled with clouds, the next a sleek obsidian drop vessel lay half submerged in a marsh, steaming as if born from the planet's own molten core. The creatures that watched from the treetops, a species too primitive for galactic classification, vanished into the canopy. Even they knew something unnatural had entered the jungle. Viacor stepped into the mire, like it welcomed him. 7 feet tall, built like a war golem, his armor was fused as flesh, biosynthetic musculature twitching beneath dark plates etched with kill runes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His reputation whispered louder than any broadcast. Former arena champion, ZHYR executioner, a lead of the Kale Syndic. He'd been activated only once before, on Varnes 5, when the automated fleet failed to suppress a planetary rebellion, and ZHYR pride demanded a surgical purge. He hunted every rebel leader down in 10 days, left a pyramid of skulls as a message. Now he was on Gorvax 3, and he was hunting one man. Jack Maloran was already moving. He hadn't seen the hunter arrive, but he felt it, like a chill in the marrow, like the jungle holding its breath. He and Mason had relocated deeper into the southeast quadrant, where thick mist rose from geothermal vents and the terrain became a shifting mosaic of tunnels, pits, and root systems. Mason was quiet. He'd grown quieter each day. Something about the jungle was draining him. How sure are we about the intel? He asked while checking the spring tension tripwires they'd placed behind their camp. Sure enough, Jack replied. Encrypted chatter spiked. One name repeated. Viacor. Mason grimaced. Thought that was a myth. Not anymore. They didn't build elaborate defenses. No bunkers. No turrets. Jack knew better. Viacor wouldn't be outmaneuvered by hardware. What he respected was unpredictability. So Jack offered it. They split up. Jack took the river path, a narrow trench of mud and slick rock that wound between cliff ridges. Mason circled wide, rigging fallback points and noise traps with stripped-down parts from salvage drones. It wasn't much, but they didn't need much. They only needed one opportunity. Viacor followed the trail like a ghost. Not one tripwire triggered. Not one decoy fooled him. He didn't see Jack, but he knew he was near. His visor flashed thermal scans through layers of foliage, tracing recent chemical residue from gun oil and synthetic sweat. He picked up vibrations in the soil, subtle irregularities left by boot treads too deliberate to be native fauna. He adjusted the dampening system on his boots, shifting to full stealth mode. Then he crouched, placed 2 fingers of mud, and whispered in his own tongue, "You've earned my walk." Jack was ahead, crouched behind a stone formation shaped like a jagged fong. He'd chosen it because it funneled wind and sound, like a natural amplifier. He placed a crude metal disc into a notch carved in the stone wall. It was linked to a directional sound emitter he'd salvaged from a ZHYR communicator. He pressed a button. A recording played, Mason's voice shouting a curse, followed by the sharp crack of a rifle. The jungle answered like a storm had passed through. VA Corps responded instantly, pivoting to the west and charging to the fern-choked path. His shoulder-mounted auto-targeter snapped open, scanning for muzzle flash. He didn't slow down. He didn't hesitate. That was mistake number 1. As he moved to the western path, the earth gave way. Jack had mapped that sinkhole days ago. It looked solid from above, roots crusted with clay, stable enough to fool a scanner. VA Corps dropped 6 meters into the pit, hitting hard. Not enough to kill him, but enough to stagger. Mistake number 2 was assuming Jack would wait for a clean shot. Jack was already moving. He slid down the slope, not toward the edge but the far side, where he'd stashed his second rifle, shorter, with a reinforced chamber and a slug built for brute force. He found the lip of the sinkhole and looked down. VA Corps had already gotten up. He stood in the pit, like a monster out of myth, eyes glowing behind his mask, chest rising with inhuman steadiness. Jack didn't speak. He just pulled the trigger. The round hit VA Corps dead center, blasting armor shards into the air. The hunter stumbled, bled, but didn't fall. Jack fired again. The second shot struck the side of VA Corps' helmet, breaking a piece off and exposing raw skin beneath. Thick gray, veined like stone. VA Corps lunged. Jack had expected that too. He let the rifle fall, rolled back, and triggered the trap he'd buried beneath the moss. It wasn't an explosion. It was worse. A flash bomb tuned to blind multispectral vision and short-circuit neural links. Not lethal, but for someone as tech-integrated as VA Corps, disorienting beyond reason. The hunter screamed, more out of rage than pain, and Jack capitalized. Knife in hand, he dropped into the pit, boots connected with the back of VA Corps' knees. He jammed the blade into the alien's neck joint and twisted. Blood poured, black and hot. VA Corps swung wildly, catching Jack's shoulder with a backhand strong enough to crack bone. Jack hit the wall, dazed but conscious. VA Corps staggered, stumbled, and fell. Jack didn't move for a while. He watched the body, waited. Only when he saw the light fade from VA Corps' cybernetic eye did he finally speak into his comm. "Mason, target's down." The line crackled. "Confirm?" Jack stood, favoring his right side. Close and personal. Real messy. But yeah, confirmed. There was a long pause before Mason answered again. "Damn, you actually did it." Jack didn't respond. He looked down at the body, the symbol of elite supremacy, this engineered god, and felt nothing but the dull ache of another mission done. But far above, in the data chambers of Consortium, the kill report triggered an automated alert. Not just that VA Corps had died, but how he died. Manual weapon. Proximity combat. No AI. The report was tagged with a rare classification. Unanticipated human adversary. Lethality anomaly. Jack didn't know it, but his name had just entered a dozen restricted watch lists across the galaxy. He did, however, know what came next. There'd be more. More hunters. Smarter ones. Or worse. "They're not going to stop," Mason said through the comm. Jack looked at his bloody hands, his cracked ribs, the jungle mist curling like breath around his boots. "No," he said softly, "but neither are we." He picked up his rifle and disappeared into the green. The ship was a city suspended in space, orbiting above Gorvax. 3 like a judgment. The Vigilant Dominion was the largest vessel in the ZHYR Consortium's war fleet. It carried 5 command decks, 2 dreadnought hangars, its own gravity well generators, and a central atrium larger than most Terran stadiums. It had never lost a battle, never sustained critical damage. never been infiltrated. Until now, Jack Maloran lay motionless in a vent shaft just 2 meters above the inner sanctum of the War Council chamber. The shaft was barely wide enough for his frame. Every breath felt like a betrayal. Below him, a dozen ZHYR command figures gathered around a hollow emitter, their voices sharp and layered in that crystalline alien dialect. The meeting was unrecorded, off-network, secret. That had been their mistake. Jack had arrived aboard 3 days earlier, hidden in the carcass of a downed ZHYR transport. He'd sabotaged its emergency beacon and let the jungle reclaim it, then crawled inside its scorched engine cavity and waited. When salvage drones collected it and dragged it to orbit, he became part of the wreckage. Now he was inside their most sacred stronghold, close enough to hear the smug timbre of Archon Valeta's voice echoing across the chamber. They send snipers, trained in mud and failure. And you call this war? Laughter echoed among the gathered commanders. The Archon's robes gleamed with reactive lights, displaying patterns of victory in rhythm with his speech. His head crested with silver ridges, each twitching in distaste. This Deadeye, this human myth, has cost us face, not power, he sneered. We are not hunting a soldier. We are chasing a ghost story. Jack steadied his breathing. His rifle rested beside him, disassembled into 4 pieces. Noise-sensitive assembly. One wrong click would bring the ceiling down on him. He began reassembling it, finger by finger, movement like prayer. No digital parts. No targeting AI. Just hardened iron, friction-fit locks, and a slug bill from molten debris scavenged from the last elite hunter he killed. Across the chamber, Valeth raised a 3-fingered hand. Enough. Let us finalize the Earth eradication protocol and bury this foolishness. The moment had come. Jack locked the final segment of the rifle into place and angled the barrel downward through a vent slat. He had no scope, no readout, just muscle memory and mathematics. Distance, 1.7 kilometers if you included the atrium curve. Angle, 15 degrees downward, lateral wind curl from the artificial atmosphere simulated at level 3. One shot. That was all he'd brought. His breath slowed. He didn't hear Mason's voice in his ear. Didn't hear the warning alarms that had begun buzzing in the maintenance decks behind him. Didn't feel the sweat rolling down the side of his jaw. He just saw the target. Valeth turned to gesture toward a planetary model when the slug hit him. A single, thunderous crack shattered the silence. The bullet pierced the Archon's crown and exploded out the base of his neck in a gout of molten flesh and shattered bone. He crumpled midward, a gleaming symbol of power extinguished in an instant. Chaos didn't come immediately. There was a moment of silence, broken only by the soft hiss of the hologram fading. Then panic. Commanders bolted for cover. Security drones activated, hovering with lethal precision, scanning for threats that didn't compute. Their algorithms had no concept of a man firing from a vent. With a rifle made of dirt and memory, Jack was already gone. He moved through the ducts like blood through veins, rifle strapped tight, hands leaving wet smears from the recoil's bruising force. Alarms blared across every deck. The voice of the ship's AI rang in 6 languages. Security breach. Unknown threat detected. Code Nova-Red. He reached the maintenance corridor and dropped through a loose panel. A technician spotted him and raised a weapon. Jack fired first. The ZHYR crumpled. He ran. Through access tubes and dim-lit halls. He ran with purpose. Not escaping. Navigating. His target wasn't just the Archon. It was the ship itself. On the lowest deck, behind an unguarded door masked as a storage unit, was a backup power regulator linked directly to the bridge systems. Jack reached it, planted his final charge, and spoke softly into his comm unit. One last message sent through a frequency only Mason would know. For Earth. He detonated the charge. The power regulator fried instantly, cascading energy failure through command protocols. Hollow systems shattered. Weapon locks failed. Communications severed. On the bridge, commanders screamed. Jack didn't wait to watch them fall. He sprinted through the airlock toward the emergency drop pod station. Each pod was built for one ZHYR. Massive, awkward, not meant for humans. But Jack had planned for that. He climbed into the smallest one, modified the biometric lock with a pulse tool, and sealed a hatch just as the corridor lit with gunfire behind him. The pod launched seconds later, streaking through the atmosphere like a comet of vengeance. As it tore toward the planet, he let his eyes close, not to sleep, just to remember. He saw the faces of those lost, the civvies vaporized on Mars, the soldiers executed on Europa, the pilots burned alive in vacuum. He saw Mason's face, half shadowed beneath a canopy, and he heard the HFY's laughter one last time, echoing in his memory, the same laughter they used before every purge, before every genocide, before they knew fear. The pod slammed into Gorvak's 3's soil like a thunderclap. Jungle swallowed it whole. By the time HFY recovery teams arrived, it was empty. No body, no rifle, no footprints. Just one message scorched into the side of the pod with chemical acid. In HFY glyphs, you mocked the shot. Now fear the marksman. Across the galaxy, broadcast spread. The Archon was dead. The invincible warship compromised. Human resistance had pierced the heart of HFY superiority. Deadeye had taken the shot, and now no one laughed.